She's got a couple patents pending on novel health products, including the iCell, which is an ingredient of RNA drops. She's on the medical advisory board of the not-for-profit educational site Nutritional Magnesium Association. Carolyn, welcome. How are you?
I'm just great, George. It's wonderful to be here with you.
I'm looking forward to this. You know, when I speak at conferences and events, every once in a while I'll come across a doctor. He calls himself Magnesium Man.
Oh, right.
And he wears a T-shirt with a big M on it.
I know, the Superman M, Morley Robbins. And well, he'd like to be called a doctor, but he's not a doctor.
Okay.
He's a wonderful person, a magnesium expert. I used to call him a magnesium fanatic. He got into it after he read my book on magnesium and got himself out of the hospital business and started into the helping people business.
Well, you know, it's interesting, too, because your work, I think, has been the catalyst for a lot of practitioners and people who are now proponents of magnesium as being probably one of the most important substances that you can take for health, for your heart, for your arteries, and everything else.
Yes, it seems so simple, and once I can convince people that it is that simple, they say, okay, I'm going to try it. As soon as people try magnesium, they feel better, and they just spread the word. So I think we're doing some good. We're getting the word out there because magnesium can be a lifesaver.
Let's talk, first of all, about the depletion of magnesium, Carolyn. In our natural state, human beings, how much magnesium do we take in? Where do we get it from?
Yes, we're supposed to have 500, 600, 700 milligrams in our body on a daily basis. And we used to get that, George, about 100 years ago from the food we ate. We're lucky now if we get 200 milligrams. So, we're 3 times
deficient
than we should be. And in my book, in the foreword, I wrote about the Congress in 1934. They were talking about the depletion of the soil and how people were starving for nutrients. They were feeding themselves more and more and more calories because they kept missing the nutrients. So they were getting fatter, but less nutrients in the food that we're taking in. So it's become a real dilemma now with even more processed food, which burns off magnesium. With food that's even cooked, you lose your magnesium. So we lose it in our food. It's not in the soil anymore. And what's really scary, what I found out in a recent lecture I went to at the Weston A. Price Foundation, Roundup Ready, the Monsanto herbicide, it binds minerals. So if you have Roundup Ready in the soil, it's removing 50% of the magnesium that's left in the soil. And Roundup Ready has a half-life of 23 years. So, I mean, we're hit so many ways with this magnesium depletion. And when we talk about what it does for the body, you can see that it's killing us, losing all this magnesium.
Well, let's talk about magnesium and what it does for the body.
It has so many functions. I mean, it starts with being responsible for the ATP production in the body. ATP, you probably know, George, adenosine triphosphate is the energy molecule of every cell in the body. So if you don't have magnesium to work in that biochemistry that creates ATP, then you don't have energy. So that's kind of the bottom line. Then it goes from there to every cell in the body takes in magnesium in order for it, in the muscle sense, to contract and relax, in the nerve sense, in order to fire nerve impulses. So it makes muscles and nerves work. But what's interesting is if you have too much calcium in the body and not enough magnesium, the calcium is the contracting factor, magnesium is the relaxing factor. So if you don't have enough magnesium and too much calcium, you end up going into muscle spasm and nerve spasm.
Is the body, Carolyn, merely because, we're all made from the same kind of source, we're stardust, basically.
Right.
Does everyone at their inception, did they all have basically the same amount of minerals in their system?
Good point. But see, that would depend on what their mother had. You know, what was she eating or taking when she was pregnant?
Mm-hmm.
And the midwives will tell you straight out that women need magnesium. Hundreds of years ago, they talked about the salts, which is Epsom salts, that women who are pregnant needed to soak in Epsom salts. And that would give them enough magnesium. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate. And that magnesium was necessary to relax the muscles, keep the blood pressure down, keep fluid from building up. And why we know magnesium does all that is if you don't have enough magnesium and you get a condition called eclampsia, then the woman gets this fluid retention, high blood pressure, and hypertension leading to seizures and migraine headaches and all sorts of horrible symptoms. What do they do when a woman has eclampsia? I was in my clinical clerkship when I watched this scenario happening, and I thought, what drugs can they use on this poor woman who was going to deliver twins that would save the twins and save her? They put up magnesium sulfate in an IV, and all the symptoms go away. And
amazing.
When I asked the doctors over the years, well, why don't we just use IV magnesium for edema instead of using diuretic drugs, for high blood pressure instead of using calcium channel blockers, for seizures instead of using horrendous medications, they say, oh, well, we don't bother with that. We have plenty of good drugs for other people. So we've got a culture that is trained to use drugs for everything and not trained to look at simple nutrients.
Well, what's so amazing, the planet I think of as a host, and we're like leeching on the host basically, but I mean, we do rely on every source, physically at least. It's interesting that we have the physical and the spiritual, but
yeah.
It's interesting that the physical end of us needs everything that's on this planet, the mineral sources and everything else in order to have a comfortable, healthy life.
Right, microcosm, macrocosm. And just you saying that, George, makes me think of how magnesium and calcium kind of got into the problem they have gotten into. Apparently humanity grew up around the oceans because that's where we could get the fish and all the other things to survive. So in the ocean, there's 3 times the magnesium as there is calcium in ocean water. So in the seaweeds, in the fish and everything, you would get a lot of magnesium and maybe not so much calcium. I mean, we didn't have dairy cattle, we didn't have cheese and all the rest of it. This was way back. So there was a fail-safe built into the human body that if you had too much magnesium that you really didn't need, you would get a laxative effect. The opposite with calcium. Calcium was grabbed onto like, nobody's business because you really needed it for your bones. And vitamin D comes into it too, George, because vitamin D grabs calcium. That's its main function.
Can you get enough vitamin D from sunlight?
Some people can. I live in Maui. I can do it. There is there's a school of thought that you can't. I do believe if you really try, you can, or you can use sun lamps because, I'm not going to make a lot of friends by saying I am not on the bandwagon of high-dose vitamin D supplementation, but, that's a whole huge topic.
The magnesium end, how did you get involved in that? How did you pinpoint that?
Well, what's interesting, I was living in New York, and I was trying to shop a book to Random House on Chinese diet therapy that I was writing with one of my Chinese medicine teachers.
Okay.
And they said, we just signed a book like that. But by the way, we just had one of our editors who seemed to cure her migraine headaches with magnesium. Will you write a book on magnesium for us? So they came to me. And I was a bit, surprised because I thought, how can I find 300 pages of information on one mineral, even though from my naturopathic training, I knew how important magnesium was. But, not until I began researching did I realize that my heart palpitations that I'd get, under stress or whenever, and my incredible leg cramps, Charlie horses that I get in the middle of the night.
Those are painful, by the way.
Horrible.
Aren't they?
I
feel like somebody stabbed you in the leg.
Or in my calves. And I used to be a dancer, so I have these great calf muscles. Yeah, they would throw you to the ground because it was so painful. And in the middle of the night, they would wake you up. So those were my two magnesium deficiency symptoms. And if I hadn't, gotten to write this book, I might not have known about that for years. So they came to me, and I'm so glad they did. That was in, the late 90s. And actually, George, the book was ready to just go to print and be published right around 9/11. And then the world stopped. The whole publishing world, nothing was put out. Everything stopped. But in the publishing industry, no books were put out for a whole year. And, what I did, I spent a lot of my time trying to, work in around the detoxification centers after 9/11 and tell people to take magnesium.
Well, with Dr. Carolyn Dean, her book, The Magnesium Miracle. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I was going to say, by then I knew how important it was to detoxify the body.
It's critical, isn't it?
Oh, man. The things it does, when I first researched, this goes back to 1958, they had discovered about 300 different enzyme systems that require magnesium. And now they're saying maybe 500. And some people are saying, well, if it works on every ATP molecule in the body, then it's almost like 80% of all our body functions require magnesium in order to work. And what's working against us is the medical establishment does not, quote unquote, believe in nutrients. I went to medical school. I sat there. We did not talk about magnesium once. It's incredible.
Well, let's talk about magnesium and where people get it in their diet. Where can you get it? You said we're 200 or 300 milligrams short, right?
Yes. Well, I would like to think we could get it in our diet, but if it's not in the soil, if they've been using Roundup Ready, it's going to be just totally depleted from the soil. But you can, if you make a concerted effort, for example, seaweeds will have magnesium. I have a list in my book, and I'm looking at it right now. Kelp, 760 milligrams, but that's in 10 tablespoons, so good luck with that. Wheat bran has 490 milligrams in 10 tablespoons. Wheat germ, almonds, cashews, bruised yeast, buckwheat, Brazil nuts, dulse, filberts, peanuts, millet. So what we see here is seaweeds, nuts, seeds, and grains. They will have magnesium, but maybe not enough because it depends on the soil in which they were grown. Herbs may have a little more. Purslane, cilantro are loaded with magnesium, so people can stock up on those. But I think, what we'll probably get to is, well, how do you know you're magnesium deficient? And
what are the symptoms? And then how do you know you're not taking too much? Can you take too much?
That's where the fail-safe comes in. If you have too much magnesium, you will get the laxative effect, and then you won't have it anymore. So that does save us. Now, you see, that's very different from calcium, because calcium, the way I talked about it, it's grabbed onto and held very tight. And people who take too much calcium, they'll get constipation, they'll get calcifications, they'll get arterial calcifications, fibromyalgia, calcifications, gallstones, kidney stones, heel spurs.